I could see some people at the back passing out already.
They're like, yeah.
We paid for this.
Exactly. But I mean, you've accomplished so much.
Have I?
Which is why your profile is so long. Wow, that's so amazing. I don't think we've ever.
I hired Gavin as my PR guy. That's why it was so long.
And not everything is here, hey. So we're still gonna chat about that.
No,
So
but I
welcome
mean,
to StartUp Grind.
Thank you, but I think that's true for anybody. If any of you had to write a detailed CV or kind of program of your life up to now, you could choose to embellish lots of things, and I'm sure there are many people in this room who've achieved more in many ways than I have. So thank you. It's a kind introduction.
Awesome. So yeah, welcome to StartUp Grind. Give him a round of applause. I'm very excited to host you, and StartUp Grinders are also very excited to have you as well. So we normally, when we interview our guests, we normally go back to way back where you were born. Like, where are you from?
I was born in Pretoria. I'm the eldest of 3 kids.
Woohoo, Pretorians.
I lived in Pretoria most of my life. My credentials there are pretty good. The place is named after my great-great-great-great-grandfather. I went to Pretoria Primary School for a short time. Then we were in Natal for a short while. Came back, Pretoria High School, university in Pretoria, and I still live there.
Wow.
So yeah, I drive through every. You listen, nobody's up at 4:30 in the morning when I'm on the highway. So
there's no
it's doable.
traffic literally at that time. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. There actually is quite a lot of traffic, which shows you that there is an economy. I have a distinct feeling that some people here are just for the entertainment. Now, honestly, I just for my own purposes, how many people in here are entrepreneurs? How many people here have started their own business recently or in the last?
Almost everyone.
That's
hey?
amazing. All right,
Yes,
good.
yes.
Then we're in really solid company. Thank you.
Yeah. And radio. When did you get into radio? And how old were you?
I started
radio?
on campus radio. I was studying law at university, and I realized very quickly that law wasn't for me. It was really a way to kill time between lectures because we had a lot of gaps in our lectures, and the radio station on the campus at the University of Pretoria was very well established. It had been there for about 10, maybe 15 years, and they used to, in the very beginning, only broadcast to the cafeteria, so anyone who was eating lunch would hear them, and that was it. So you had 5 listeners if you were lucky. But by the time I started there, we had an FM license, and we were broadcasting across much of Pretoria. And we managed through, I suppose, the stable of talent that we had at the time and the kind of programming and even the commercial opportunities that we were trying to exploit, we managed to grow quite a big audience for a campus radio station. And it became, there are so many luminaries who've come out of there. Annele, who's a good friend of mine, is also a graduate and alumnus of Radio TUKS. So there are a lot of people who were at that station at the time. I made sure that I was fired, that I didn't have any other option, otherwise I would have probably still been there. It was very easy. You'd do your show and, you'd go to the news cafe in Hatfield Square and get drunk and
that's it.
Yeah, you'd meet all the girls on campus. There was really no reason to leave. And you didn't get paid, so there wasn't a reason to stay necessarily.
Yes.
But I was fired for doing outrageous things there, and I met John Berks at 702.
Yes.
Because I really wanted to meet him. He was one of the people in radio that I looked up to. And when I met him, he told me that the person I really had to meet if I wanted to get anywhere in broadcasting was Rena Bromberg, who you mentioned earlier in my introduction. She's here. Now, this is the real superstar here, but none of you will recognize her. And I must have done something right, because she said, all right, I might want to work with you. You have potential. And we started working together all of 18 years ago now. I began producing shows at 702 and then went on to do the morning show eventually, taking over from John Berks, which was, a huge pair of shoes to fill. And then took on the job at 5. We were there for 7 years. Most successful morning show in 5FM's history, I'm happy to say.
That deserves a round of applause, I think.
Thank you. And then, as Professor Jonathan Janssen, who was the rector of Free State University, once said to me, if you do the same thing and there are caveats to this. I don't want anyone to jump and make a bad decision on the basis of this. But he said if you do the same thing for 7 years or more, you lack imagination. Now, obviously, that's not true in the case of starting your own business, because it might take a little longer than that.
Yes.
And in many cases, the most successful businesses in the world start catching on a lot longer than their founders wish they would.
Yes.
Tell me about it. But it was necessary to do something that would enable me to, first of all, create opportunity for other people, which I'm very proud we're doing at CLIFFCENTRAL.com, and to kind of fast track all the brand building we'd done over so many years into something that we could really develop our own way, where we didn't have the old rules of radio, the regulatory stuff, the controls and the mechanisms that are put in place by big corporations that run most of the media in this country.
Yes.
We needed to develop something that was unscripted, uncensored, unradio, not radio.
And then I just want to ask, why did you then decide to start a podcast? Why podcasting?
Well, to be perfectly honest, in the beginning, it was really going to just be my show, and podcasting was just a way for people who either couldn't afford the data or people who didn't know yet what streaming was to still have an alternative to get the show. But very quickly we realized that podcasting was going to, at that stage it wasn't, but it was going to become the more popular option for people, because podcasting is really listening by design. It's something that you do because you can do other things while you're listening to a podcast. You can download it and listen to it this afternoon, tomorrow evening, on Saturday, wherever you have. If you're cooking, whether you're at gym, whether you're driving the car, you can listen to a podcast and do those other things. So you can get all the information, the entertainment, the inspiration, and the empowerment that you want from that particular podcast, but it's on your terms.
And now the $1 million question would be, how do podcasts make money? How do you, what is the income model around podcasting?
Well, it's largely through sponsorship and advertising, but it's more especially in the area of branded content creation.
Okay.
So what we want to do in the big scheme of things, which is why CLIFFCENTRAL.com isn't a radio station or even an online streaming station, we're a content hub. We create meaningful, powerful content. So it could be something as niched as fly fishing. And if 50 people listen to a fly fishing podcast once a week, if you sell fly fishing equipment, those 50 people are worth 1,000 times every listener that you'd reach on commercial radio.
Yeah.
So you'd pay a premium for them and you'll reach the audience. I always say, don't count the audience you reach the audience that counts. And that for me is an extraordinarily important thing about the whole media environment now from 2017 onwards, is that those mass media market shares are going to be reduced hugely over the next few years, because people don't want to be considered part of a group that's being marketed to. Nobody likes being target marketed. It's spam.
Nobody likes being sold to. I mean, even when you look at adverts on Google, nobody hardly ever clicks.
Careful, Google's a sponsor. Nice to them.
No.
Look after your sponsors is rule number one.
Normally, like when
I agree with
people
you.
hardly ever click the adverts.
And you know,
so
a lot of
be
that.
as organic as possible.
And what's nice about what we're doing is that our audience choose us. You know, usually in radio or in television, even in print media, Gavin, you'll know this too. You have a title or a program or a series, and it is target marketed to black women in their 20s, as if all black women in their 20s are the same. What we do is we say, here's a stable of 40 or more shows that we produce, and more that we're going to produce, and particular subject matter that we're going to start doing. And you choose what you like, and you listen to what matters to you, and you find the stuff that you care about. And that's all. You are the one who makes those decisions. You put yourself in the position of editor and of curator. And I think that's important, because we're already doing that in social media. As much as they try to spam us with stuff by using algorithms and everything else, it's very clever, don't get me wrong. Eventually you get tired of Mark Zuckerberg because you clicked on one Game of Thrones video. You get 100 a day, and eventually you want to kill yourself with that sword of Jon Snow's. So what we do is we let our audience decide. We give them the power to choose, and we give them the power also to tell us when we're doing it wrong. And our audience are the smartest people because they're the ones we're doing it for.
Yeah. And the nice thing about, like you're saying, the nice thing about podcasting is that they choose to actually listen to their shows.
And they listen to most, if not all, of the content. So if you listen to radio, what they usually do is they use a mechanism called time spent listening to figure out, and it's a rough calculation, 1980s technology, it's a clipboard. And they go, how many minutes did you listen to the radio for? And people fill that in, and then they multiply it by 1,000, and they say to Metro, oh, you've got 5 million listeners. And Metro goes, thanks, that's great.
Yeah.
They don't know that for a fact. It's absolute nonsense, and they've been lying to the public for years.
Yeah.
What we do is we give you a podcast. The chances are if you download it and you press play on your phone, by that stage, you've already decided you want to listen to this. And the chances are very big that you will listen all the way through. In fact, the research shows that most people who download an episode will listen not only to that whole episode, but all the other episodes in a series.
Yes, exactly.
So this is kind of where we're going. And
Yes.
it's about connecting to people in a way where they determine the parameters of that connection.
And then for, if somebody want to start a podcast or want to have their own podcast show, what are some of the technicalities that they should consider first? Because, you'd hear people saying, I started my podcast from my own bedroom. Or, it seems like it doesn't really require a lot.
No, it doesn't, but there are shit podcasts. and a lot of them. Just like anyone here could start their own YouTube channel. Many of you may already have. So what? Some of you will work, some of you will succeed, some of you won't. The advantage that we have at CLIFFCENTRAL.com is that with all the shows that we're incubating, with all the shows that we partner with, and Gavin's on one of them, Shemaine's on another, these shows are all designed and edited and content produced by the people who do them, and then we help them with the infrastructure, the technological backup, the know-how, occasionally pointers in the right direction with how you work this new medium and how you make it work for you and your audience.
Yes.
And those are things that you can't just learn on the trot. Those are things that it takes 20 years or more of broadcasting
and I'm sure
to
some of
help
the stuff
you.
you learned while you
Absolutely.
were in the game as well. And then I also want to know about your relationship with Rena. You co-founded the company with her.
Yes.
What are some of the basics that somebody should consider when they're co-founding a company with somebody?
Always listen to Rena.
So what are some of the things that Rena says then?
Anything I've said has probably been wrong over the last... In fact, she should be up here right now. Look, the point is it's give and take and it's yin and yang. So you've got... In Rena, you've got this wise, sage... person of experience. She started 702 as a talk radio station along with some other people, but she was instrumental in that. So her history in the medium of radio is unquestionably one of the most powerful, and her experience that she brings to bear is tremendous. What I bring is a bit of the talent, a little bit of the fire. I make impulsive decisions. I can probably break my way into any decision maker's boardroom if I need to. And between us, we are also surrounded by another group of our nuclear Cliff Central family. Sia's here and Dori's here. These are some of the people who've made it possible for us. Greg, our technical expert, this guy's a genius. You need to have the right people around you to make it fire on all cylinders. And it's a combination of factors. You have to be able to listen to each other, and if you co-found, and there are a lot of great sort of co-founding partnerships, Google's one of them.
Yes, Uber being one of them as well.
There are plenty of examples, and usually when a company has just one founder, that poor person usually burns out.
Yes.
Because they're doing everything themselves. If you have someone to help you when you're down because they're up, or when they're down because you're up, and you've got to learn to talk, and I'm still developing a lot of these skills, trust me. But it's about, first of all, a trust, and it's about an ability to hear each other out and to not be attached to outcomes and to be flexible.
Yes.
And also for that relationship to develop, and it helps when you are also friends. It helps when you actually respect each other. But I do think that the most important part of that is that you are you're open to that other person's ideas all the time. And I haven't always been. I think that happens in most partnerships, sometimes you shut down, sometimes they shut down, sometimes you look at each other and you go, I really don't want to be in the same room as you today. But that's natural.
Yeah. So was CLIFFCENTRAL the kickstart of your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes, I mean, in terms of building my own brand from the beginning, that was something we were very conscious about from day one. It's something I also, again, leveraged quite extensively on Rena's experience in that respect. But there are things that everyone has. There are those innate qualities and characteristics that everyone in this room has that no one else. You'll only ever be the second best anybody else, but you're the best you. And I think when you acknowledge your weaknesses and you acknowledge your strengths, you find ways of making the strengths shine and the weaknesses diminish. But yes, entrepreneurship in its full capacity began when we started CLIFFCENTRAL.com.
So why didn't you just, here you are running one of the most coolest companies ever. Why didn't you just chill and just run the company? Why did you then continue to being on radio, waking up so early in the morning?
Oh, yeah.
Doing the broadcasting. Why didn't you step back and just also focus on being like a proper entrepreneur, no longer be on the limelight?
Yeah, you think you can do it all. But I got to be honest, the only reason I did that was because I'd already created such a lot of disruption for the listeners. That those people who came with us, I wanted to make it as easy for them to carry on doing what they'd always done and what they'd always enjoyed.
Yes.
In retrospect, I may have made a rod for my own back. But I can't regret that now. 3 years in, we've had tremendous success. I think things have to change at some point. We need to reinvigorate and reinvent what we're doing at the moment. We've discovered over the past 3 years a lot of things about podcasting, about the digital environment, about online advertising and marketing and content creation that position us uniquely in South Africa and in Africa, frankly, to be able to construct new products, which I think will be even more successful and valuable in the long run for this business. And that's what keeps me happy. It's not so much keeping up the old, which may change very soon, but it's also changing things while the bus is running, you're changing the wheels and developing new stuff that you haven't done before. We're constantly under pressure to innovate and to do things first. There wasn't really a podcasting thing in South Africa before us.
Yes. And they all came after you. Even all the other radio stations, now all of a sudden everyone is doing a podcast.
They're creatively bankrupt.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about your book, your latest book.
Sure.
It's created a lot of controversies around.
Has it?
Yeah, I think so, right?
I hope that all those people who were offended also bought it. Then I don't mind.
Don't worry, they wouldn't mention their names. And you always say, whenever somebody mentions your name or whenever they say a comment about you, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of them would be like, look, I'm not a fan of Gareth, but. And then normally they would say, right, yeah? And normally they would say like something really nice or cool about you.
I don't mind that at all.
You
it's like a lot of people say, Julius makes a lot of good points, but.
But, yeah.
And people say, I used to like Helen Ziller, but. So I suppose all the people who attract attention in South Africa, because we're such a humble society, and this is historical and everything else, that people are very frightened to have themselves associated with any person in their entirety, right? Even Madiba, you get people who go, well, he sold out.
Yes.
This is how South Africans are. We can never just, I like that guy, or I don't like that person. I'm happy with either.
But from an entrepreneurial point of view, how do you then differentiate the part where people don't really like you and the other part where they're still hanging on to buying your products and using your product and also like respecting you as well? How do you distinguish that?
The latter matters, the former doesn't. It's that simple. I'm not in this to be popular. I've never really cared about, public acclaim. And if any of you don't like me, that's absolutely fine. I just question why you've spent money to be here listening to me if that's the case. But But that goes for my audience too. You know, I always thought it was really stupid that on radio you had to warn people that they might be upset or offended by something when it's all up to them to just switch it off or switch it on. The power is in your hands.
Yeah.
What babysitting do you do? How childish must you be to constantly have to be looked after like this? It's an insult. It's an insult to the average South African's intelligence, and it's an incursion on their freedom of speech, not in respect of me being able to say what I want, but your right to hear what you want.
Yes.
How dare anyone prevent you from hearing exactly what you want?
Yes.
This is part of the reason we're on the internet, right?
Yes. And you've always been very, I mean, open-minded. You've always said whatever it is that you've always wanted to say. And, you know, a lot of people have been calling you like the white Julius. Don't tell me you didn't know this. Come on.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. When I went through one of the many controversies in the last 4 or 5 years, I think it was the speeding arrest, Julius phoned me out of the blue and he said, Chief, there are many people who don't like you and who don't like me. But there are more who like you and like me.
Yes.
And I always thought that was probably, you know, the problem with trying to be liked by everyone is that it's a zero-sum game. By trying to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody, right?
Yeah.
And to be on air 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, for almost 20 years now, you're going to say something that's going to upset everyone at some point, if you're honest. If you're just one of those people who says what the time is and what the song was that just played,
You seem to be doing a lot of it.
and no one's going to care, right? No one's going to remember you. No one's
absolutely,
going to find anything that you say meaningful or
Yes.
impactful or useful. And I think that would be a far worse thing, to just hold on to a job and not cause any trouble, not have anybody remember you, but just hold on to that. It's sort of like those people who blend in middle management in most companies.
In their small cubicles.
You never really know what they do.
But they're there every morning.
Yeah, and they're always telling you what you did wrong, but somehow they don't get told what's going wrong with their department or...
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I will say also that this controversy thing is it's not sought. I don't go out of my way to upset people. I don't go out of my way to get a reaction. In the beginning, I did when I was younger.
Okay.
Especially, you know, when you're under 25 years old, you'll do anything for attention. And that may have gone maybe with me to about 28, maybe 30. I'm still growing up in some ways, but really, I don't go to sleep at night wishing ill on anybody, and I don't have any part of me that wishes to upset people on a daily basis. It's just it's a stupid way to live. It's a negative energy that you keep putting out. What I try to do, wherever possible, is say what I think. And that is to me also the definition of integrity, and that's important.
And how important is that persona in entrepreneurship, or especially on the entry level, you know? Because a lot of times we as entry level entrepreneurs are afraid to say other things because we feel like, okay, they would think, okay, maybe you're just too much, or you're just a troublemaker. We don't want to work with people like you, you know? How does that work?
Well, I'm sure anybody who's been on social media has had that experience, because we're so afraid to say the wrong thing that we sometimes say nothing. And I think that's a bad position to take, because then how do you know you're free? I mean, you only know you're free if you can say what you think, right? And if you can't say certain things, that means you have a master, which means you're a slave. That means you don't have any freedom. So as entrepreneurs, we should be the people who are least afraid. And we should be the ones, they keep telling us we're going to drive the economy forward.
Yes.
I mean, we don't get any tax breaks for it. Lindiwe Zulu's department's done anything for any of you? That's overwhelmingly a no. Did I miss any yeses?
No.
Put your hand up. That's the department that's meant to care about small businesses. So who are you so worried about offending? The people you care about are your clients, the market that you serve. And if you're doing a good job for them, they won't find reason to dislike or hate you, especially if you're a small business. There's an appetite in this country to support small business. We would all support each other. If we were all aware of what each other were doing, we could probably, in this room, between us, generate a couple of 100 million rand right now if we wanted to.
Yes.
And we should be doing that more. These networks matter. But if you're always afraid and you're concerned that what you say is going to upset,
somebody.
or it's some corporate brand who's terrified of
Yes.
being associated with the wrong thing, and that's happened to me. And I've got to say that I consider those brands to be the ones that I'm not going to approach in a hurry again. And there are a few. Luckily, most people are not like that. But there are people who will do everything they can to avoid controversy. And then before you know it, they put an ad on TV and people go, there are no blacks in that ad. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Or it'll be a bank and they'll say, we don't want to be involved with anything that's naughty or dangerous or sexual or isn't about family values. And the next thing, they've got a bunch of people protesting outside their door because of what their CEO said in an interview. These things are going to happen to all of us. What you've got to accept from the beginning, if you participate in society in a meaningful way, there's going to be some negative.
Yes.
I heard Magda from Signia the other day
Yes.
talking about her company.
I
She
was actually at the event.
she was very impressive, right?
Very fearless as well.
Absolutely.
She just says it like it is.
Right,
You know?
and she always has, to her credit. She didn't toe the line so that she could get the business.
Yeah.
Because of who she was, and people started to respect what she was saying and what she meant,
Absolutely,
what she
yes.
stood for,
Yes.
her business grew.
And you also had your own share of, trials and tribulations, especially over social media as well, and the other brands, which obviously we can't mention. How do you
Who?
then-
Mention them.
No, I don't want to be in trouble. Okay.
Why should I be on my own? Mention them.
Okay, you say the first word, and then I can continue with the rest.
Well, I presume, do you want me to explain what happened with Mnet?
No, actually. Oh, he said it.
It's not like they're lining up around the corner to give me another show, are they? I had a very good relationship with Mnet, actually, and with everybody involved there. But again, they were, like so many businesses these days, they were pressured by an intense uproar on social media, which only ever lasts about 7 days. So what you really should do, if I have any advice to anyone who's on social media and something bad happens, which it probably will in a small or a large way to all of us, is put your head down. Muzi Kuzwayo, who works with us now at CLIFFCENTRAL, said to me, just take a time out on this one, which was the best advice ever. But we had to fight too, because this was about an infant business of ours, which we just started. We were a year into it, year and a half. And that whole penny sparrow situation happened.
Yes.
And then Musi Maimane said, of all people, that this is the real cause of it. He said they should criminalize certain kinds of speech, that it should be illegal to say certain things. Thought crime, this is what Hitler and Stalin were famous for. And I said, after a poll that I saw where a lot of people agreed with him, my comment was, people really don't understand freedom of speech. That was what caused, that was it. That was the depth and the breadth of the controversy. Now, of course, people took that to mean that I was supporting racist speech, which I wasn't. And it all emerged later on in court. But the real court issue was about the contract. Mnet said, oh, Gareth, we don't need you for this season because you're a bit controversial, which is ironic because that's why they hired me in the first place. And then I had been talking to, because he'd been on my show that morning, Dalimpofu, who's a friend.
Yes.
And he said to me, if they try to fire you or not hire you for this season of Idols, call me up. It's all in the book. You should read it in the book. It's very well written out there.
It really is.
And
it really is, yeah.
and Dalimpofu said you've got to fight for this. Otherwise, you'll always be the guy who was fired from Idols for racism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we took them to court. It was so elegant. We won in a week, which never happens in South Africa.
Yes.
And Mnet were embarrassed, and they had to put me back on the show. And we had a terrific season. And about 3/4 of the way through the season, we arranged, Rena and I, for the top 4 to go to New York to meet Harry Connick Jr., who was an Idols judge in America. And we announced when I got back, that's my grand finale on the show.
Wow.
And then that was it. So we ended on a high, and I was very proud of that time on Idols. And I was proud of that show. And I think it was a great show. And I think my contribution was hopefully meaningful, useful, entertaining. But it's also a question of, kind of quitting while you're at the top, quitting while you're ahead. I didn't want to stay past the...
Until they kick you out.
Correct.
Well,
no, until they kicked me out, but on decent terms. and otherwise I would leave as I did on my terms, which is what I did with 5FM.
Do you ever...
And by the way, I mean, you guys have heard this 1,000 times, but entrepreneurs all talk about how you mustn't ever be afraid of being fired if you're working for someone else, or doing doing the thing that works for you, despite what repercussions may come. Some of them will be bad, some of them will be good. But, failure is not to be regarded as a death knell for anybody. And I don't mean failure in respect of, because people say to me, were you fired from 5? And I say, no, it was a resignation. But I wouldn't have been embarrassed if I was, mostly because I wouldn't have considered that a failure. If I'd done everything exactly the same way, I'd still be exactly as happy as I am now about it. There are no regrets.
Wow. And then now let's talk about Touch Central.
Yes.
How did the collab come about? Should we expect more centrals? Beth Central, maybe?
Well, this one was...
I'm hustling,
This one was fortuitous. It was... I actually I'd never really had a conversation with Touch before. We met at a party together for a mutual friend, and he was having trouble with Metro at the time, and said that he was looking at different offers from other radio stations. And I said to him, you should really do your own thing.
Yeah, I heard you say that. I think you were speaking at another event, and you actually said that. You told him to do his own thing.
Look, you're never going to get wealthy on a salary. And no matter how big that salary is, and believe me, the SABC are paying him a lot of money. So he said, okay, I had to go to Silicon Valley, came back, we had a meeting, and we decided we would help him incubate Touch Central as a music channel. That was what he wanted to do. Essentially, he wanted to create a Metro online. And that was the initial, the idea that he had. And we had the infrastructure, we had the staff, we had the experience, we had the expertise to help him put this together. And we decided to collaborate. And he was part of our family there in our building for 6 months along with his staff. And then he wanted to do things his own way, which often happens with these kinds of collaborations, and it's a good thing. He grows one way, we grow another way. And Cliff Central, I think, had become quite a different animal from Touch Central. Okay. They were doing different things. They were serving different markets. Ours was podcasting. It was mostly talk. It was speciality shows. What he was doing was a music streaming channel. And I didn't think that there was very much more I could have added there. We'd already helped him get off the ground, and he rebranded it as Touch HD and began in his own premises in April of this year, or in March of this year. And I hope it's going very well. I spoke to him not so long ago, and he said, it's tough. It is tough. Everybody here knows that when you start your own thing. Yeah. But it seems to be going well, and I wish him Godspeed. We're friends. We still talk, but we're not in business together anymore. So the two companies are separate.
Yes. And then I love that you actually collaborated with somebody else. And I also want to touch on a little bit on collaborations. A lot of people are very afraid to give their ideas to other people, thinking that, oh my God, it's going to steal my idea. If he came to you, you probably would have sold the idea and ran it and ran it better, probably, on your own. What can you say about people who are afraid to tell their ideas to people, thinking that their ideas will be stolen?
Well, I had to learn in radio very early on that radio is 100 years old. It's a very old medium. And probably everything under the sun has been done on radio. Probably the sound of almost every imaginable thing that a human ear will encounter has been represented in radio in some way. So it's not so much about the idea, and people get attached to they think that what Zuckerberg did with Facebook was the idea. I started a website with 3 other people in 1997 called gal.co.za. It was a way for students to link up, share content, study material, entertainment content, and then the crash happened in 1998, and it was we were 4 students. We were actually at varsity. I mean, that was before Zuckerberg came up with his idea. So what? I'm not the billionaire living in Palo Alto. You don't get hung up on the idea. Everybody here has good ideas. Some of you may have way better ideas than some of the people who have made billions. Don't get completely consumed by that, because it's how you execute them often that's more important than having the idea itself. And it's about who you execute them with, because no man is an island.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any questions from you guys? Oh my, no questions today?
No, right at the back there, at the top.
No, let's take this lady here.
She was first.
Oh, is it a woman? Okay, fine.
She was first.
Go.
What is that?
I thought it was a man.
Discrimination.
No, it's still a woman.
Up there.
It's still a woman, Gareth. So
I'm being discriminated even before I ask. Wow. Gareth, hi.
That's our own Rosa Parks at the back of the bus.
You mentioned branded content, especially when it comes to Cliff Central. My question is, for digital agencies that are within the content creation space, obviously the revenue is coming from the advertising side, but also you need to create content that's engaging that people want to read. So when it comes to strategizing in terms of content creation, do you first consider the consumer in terms of the person who's going to read, or the advertiser who's going to sponsor? How do you draw that line?
Well, the advertiser has to let us know what their needs are. Because they're the ones who are spending the money. The market is unaware of any of this before you provide it to them. So I think you have to start with the client, and you have to find out what it is they need before you come up with any great idea, because it might not fit their strategy. It might not be part of what they want to do. What is true about almost every business in South Africa and in the world right now is that every business is in some way, shape or form a media business. Because of social media, we're all required to communicate with our audiences, our clients, our consumers, our service providers through the internet. And therefore we have to have content to be able to give to them. In some ways that might be an audio newsletter, which may have far more stickiness within a company. So it could be internal. I mean, we launched a pop-up radio station for Investec at the beginning of this year, just to launch their own internal marketing campaign, which had nothing to do with the broader public. It was only internal, and it worked very, very well. So it depends on what the client wants, but then what we bring, because of certainly with Rena and I in our combined years in broadcasting, mainstream big broadcasting where there are millions of people listening, is we know kind of what audiences warm to. We don't always know exactly what they want, but we have an idea of what will work and what won't. And a lot of the time you have to trust your gut on that. And so far, Rena's never been wrong. I have once or twice. So, it's a combination of those two factors, but nothing in isolation. It's a very pointed question. Maybe you and I should talk a bit afterwards.
Cool. Next question, yes? You.
Well, don't make her feel
How come on? She's now acting like, oh my God.
Hi, thank you. Gareth, thanks for the talk. Good to meet you. My name is Gwena, and I'm the co-founder of a startup, very early stage startup called Fundi, which is matchmaking unemployed graduates to take jobs. And the question I have for you, so you mentioned about execution and it being about how you execute your idea. What advice do you have? Very pointed advice, practical advice, step one advice for an early stage startup to get going.
You have to exploit the networks you have. There are so many people. I mean, when we started CLIFFCENTRAL.com, there were a lot of people who were friends of ours that we'd made over, 15, 20 years in radio, who wanted to be a part of what we were doing and who offered us everything from free advertising to partnerships. You must try to leverage those in the beginning as much as possible, and keep your costs low, and employ the people you really need, and make sure that you have multi-purpose, multifunctional job descriptions, and people who can fill those and who can do many different things. They can welcome someone and make them tea and do the finances, or be able to switch on the kettle in the morning and switch the lights off at night and make sure that all the meetings happen on time during the day. You need to have people who can make important sales decisions, and you have to have these people who are passionate. And the one thing I don't think we're lacking in this country at all is passionate young people. There are when we started CLIFFCENTRAL.com, we put one Facebook status up, said we're doing auditions, we want to host a bunch of shows, who wants to come? And we had over 1,000 people line up outside our door to come and host shows. Some of them were terrible. Some of them were drunk.
Maybe they were nervous.
Some of them were broadcast professionals who had jobs at reputable, not ANN7, reputable media businesses. And that showed to me that there was a hunger and a passion in this country for opportunity. And if you can provide internships and opportunities for people to learn, and they'll have to do some of the horrible jobs too. I've cleaned floors. Gary will vouch for me. Nobody's above any job and nobody's below any job. And if you can find those people, your nucleus, your core, and if you can find the market that support you and believe in you. When they started Facebook and Snapchat, these things weren't started with grand and noble ideas of becoming the biggest businesses in the world. Snapchat was started for dick pics. And no, really.
It is true.
And Facebook was started as a way for Zuckerberg to rate the women on campus. That's not very PC. Don't believe anything he tells you now when he's running for politics. Watch. It's going to happen. These things start because there's a small but loyal and devoted crowd of people who believe in what you believe in. Stick to those people.
And on that note, are you confident about the level of entrepreneurship in South Africa and in Africa, especially where we will be competing globally as well? I mean, CLIFFCENTRAL is pretty much, competing globally because it's online. You can reach it every way.
Look, I'm a huge Afro-optimist, if there is such a word. I have always believed, and the statistics bear me out on this. So doesn't come from some shallow patriotic nonsense. This is the largest untapped consumer market of young people in the world. These people crave product. They're discerning. They are finding their space in the world. They're starting to stand up for themselves, their own background, their cultural beliefs, their identity. We're a nascent continent. We're on the way up. I don't want to be horrible, but there are continents that are dying out. There are places where the market is saturated, where they've got everything they need, where their biggest issue is whether men and women can use the same toilet or not. We have bigger fish to fry in this country. And on this continent, and there are massive opportunities for entrepreneurs. I will say, though, that it would make such a difference if the political system and if large corporations met us halfway. Because I don't think anyone in this room feels like they've had an easy time with either of those interactions. Sometimes the big companies are hard to deal with because they're big companies. They're dinosaurs. It's hard to turn them. And government really has done itself no favors with entrepreneurs and with small businesses because they don't support us. We're small fry to them. And if they just made an effort to really, and I'm talking particularly about black businesses here, if they made an effort to actually make it broad-based, to spread a little bit to all the smaller companies when they come to spend their money, I think it would help keep a lot of those companies going, and they could grow and they could develop private partnership later on that would keep them afloat for far longer and make them very, very successful. So that's obviously a reality we have to deal with, but we're losing. In South Africa, we're losing ground because they're not wasting time in Nigeria and in Tanzania and in Kenya and in Zambia and in Mozambique, frankly. And Mozambique used to be the country that we all used to say, oh, shame, poor them. Look where they are now. So we need to do a lot of work. We need to catch up. We need to get enthusiastic about this country and our economy. And there is no time to be lost now.
No,
We can't afford to sit in the third or the fourth row of this party.
But then as much as, I believe that as much as you're saying that companies need to meet us halfway, the government needs to meet us halfway, what can we as entrepreneurs do to also meet the government halfway? Because there's a lot of people who just say, it's because they're just lazy to go to work. I'm sorry to say this, but I know people who are just lazy to go to work and they just call themselves, I'm an entrepreneur. What are you selling?
Yeah. It's like those people who say to you,
It's the hustle.
I'm building my brand.
Yes. So what do we say to those people who are just mainly entrepreneurs by just
You don't do
saying
business
it?
with them. Let your money talk. Money doesn't flow uphill. And you could say any number of nice things to people like that, but you want to do business with the people who get things done.
Absolutely, yeah.
And none of us here is in this entrepreneurship cycle because we wanted to work for UNESCO. If you wanted to be in an NGO, you'd be in an NGO. That's not for us.
Yes.
We want to create success. We want to create opportunity. We want to do business. We want to work with each other. So let's get on with it. Don't worry about those people. They're a distraction. Don't need them.
Any questions? Oh, you were oh my God, this is confusing. Yes, he was first.
Hi Gareth, I'm Björn.
Hi.
Hey Beth. Sorry, let's try to get it. Hello, Beth.
all right.
Lovely to have you on the show.
Whatever.
Gareth, can you just give her a hand? Gareth, the question is, you've been
Is anyone else getting high on the glue smell? Jesus. Yeah.
Don't breathe. One of the things you've been doing really well is building a brand over the last 20 years. And I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the room are going, how do you build a brand? But the true identity of that has been the last 3 years. And I always say that brand building is only great until you have one fall. What's been your biggest unsuccess? I don't want to say failure because I always believe you can learn from it. So your unsuccess or your biggest obstacle, and how did you overcome it?
It's so funny. Rena and I were talking about that today. That a lot of the time, because she's so strategic, we've managed to mitigate huge failure. So along the way, there's nothing I'm not proud of. There's nothing there are little things I'm not proud of. There are little things that I might not have said. There are little things that I might not have done that have caused me to misstep, that have caused me to become perceived as perhaps the person that I'm not really when you meet me in regular conversation or when you listen to the show. Unfortunately, people do zero in on that stuff, and you can't be too hard on yourself. We're all going to make mistakes. I said earlier, failure is not a death knell, and it shouldn't have to be. Some of the greatest stories in business come from people who fall right to the bottom and then come right back up. In my case, I would say there have been missteps. I'm not filled with regret. I don't go to sleep at night and beat myself up about them. But I'm very, very pleased that along the way I've been able to listen to the right people who've got me back on track where I've gone wrong. You can get you mentioned the brand thing, you can get very self-absorbed. And this often happens to any of us who work on our own or who work in a partnership even, because you're alone with your thoughts at night. And you're lying in bed.
Yes.
There's no comfortable position, and you can't get to sleep, and you're worried about the balance sheet, and you're worried about how you're going to tell this person on the staff you don't need them anymore, and you're worried about how you're going to win that big client. And these things are private battles. And I'm not the kind of person who really thinks it's of any use to you to hear about more than I've already said of those things. What I've done, Where we've made mistakes, they've been very public mistakes because I'm a public personality.
Yes, yes.
If you ruin a plumbing business in your first 3 weeks as a plumber, probably you'll get away with it, except for the one client whose geezer you fuck up.
Of course, yeah.
The rest of the people aren't going to know that you were this failure. If I fail, you'll know about it, trust me.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who want to tell the story of my or DJ Spoo or anyone else's failure, because there are people who think that if we fail, then it's okay for them to fail, and that's fine. That's why I don't begrudge those people. I don't think they're mean people. I think they're small people because they imagine that by bringing others down, they themselves won't look so bad. But in truth, nobody knows who the hell they are, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that those people don't matter, but it does mean to me that it's not worth getting upset about. You know what I mean? Cool.
Next question.
Yabo.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kosi. Everybody looks at you now and they see, who you are now. But I'm also an entrepreneur, and I think it's also a spiritual journey, above everything else. So I would like to know what has motivated you to keep going, during the times that weren't now.
Well, who knows that those times aren't ahead? That's the point with these kinds of things. And you don't know. You could have a very successful business like Kodak in the 90s, right? I mean, it was up to sort of the late 90s. They were still in business. You could have a very successful business in radio. You don't know what's going to happen next. And none of us can. I don't have that answer. All I can tell you is my motivation is I love what I do. Most of it. None of us will love what we do 100% of the time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be work, right? It would be a holiday.
Yeah. And also, no matter how passionate you are about something, there will always be that shitty thing that you don't like about your work. So it happens. Even if you're extremely passionate about something, there will always be that something that's just takes the other way.
Spot on. So, from my point of view, the motivation is love what you do. Do it with people that you like working with. Make money. I mean, none of us got into this because we like the feeling of, in my case, waking up at 4 a.m. or whatever. That's madness. You'd have to be some kind of masochist. So you got to make money, because money is the market telling you've won, right? As opposed to, oh well, that was a nice idea, but you should have gone to the circus.
Also, I think it actually gives you a validation that you've created value. For as long as somebody's willing to buy what you're selling, especially doing what you love, it's actually more of a validation on its own. That okay, people are actually buying what I love doing. So it means that there's value around that.
I hope so. Again, there are no hard and fast answers to this one, because for each of us it's going to be different. You have to think about why it is that you wake up and go to work every day, why it is that you started the business that you started, and keep reminding yourself of how you can stay ahead, how you can make a difference. Everybody in Silicon Valley, I was there last year, everybody there is, they because a lot of them have made a lot of money, now they want to give back. So they go around telling everyone, well, you're in it to make the planet a better place. And look, you laugh. I mean, I would laugh on a bad day too, or maybe after my 8th glass of wine, but you're not wrong. The fact is that all business is about what you can do for someone else, that they're willing to pay for, that you do better than anyone else, or that you do that no one else does. That's all. So whatever you can be of service to someone in is a business worth carrying on.
Yes. So just to wrap up, what's next for you? What should we expect from you? What should we expect from CLIFFCENTRAL? Or should we just expect more from what you're currently busy with?
I might go home and have a shower, get into bed. Because I downloaded the pirated Game of Thrones from last week, I can't watch that. My dog will snore and wake me up at least twice
got it.
during the night. And then tomorrow I'll be back on the show. No, to answer you seriously,
Especially like, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem per
Yeah.
se. Yeah.
there are lots of things happening in media at the moment. It's a very unstable, and you made the point, which I did take note of, that the media environment is so unstable. It's changing beneath our very feet. And there are a lot of people who know that it's changing, but they're not sure of what the next thing is. So I want to provide them with the answer to that question. I want to give them a place where they can get the content that will help them achieve their ends, whether they're a client or satisfy their desire for entertainment, information, empowerment, and inspiration if they're a listener, and serve people. I want people to get what they want. And I want them to spend their spare time and their work time listening to stuff they care about.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Did you guys enjoy that?
Gavin's not sure.
Gavin? Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. We
Thank you,
really
Beth.
appreciate it. And all the best with Rena as
And
well. I wish you guys all the best. And I'm sure the feeling is mutual with, from you guys as well.
There's I'll be happy to. My email address is gareth@cliffcentral.com. Please come and visit us. We're at 18 Vessels Road in Rivonia. We always used to have people just walk in. Dori's going, oh, because Sia's going, oh. Poor Sia goes up and goes, hi, can I help you? And someone goes, yeah, Gareth told us to come. And he goes, oh shit. Although he'd never say that. He's so polite.
Yeah.
And then Sia goes, can I maybe help you? So come and see what we do. There are lots of things that we're doing that are exciting and different. And maybe you have an idea that will help us take things to the next level. I'm open to any suggestions and ideas, because the world we're creating, there isn't a blueprint for it.
Absolutely.
We're sailing in uncharted waters. It's the most exciting thing I've ever done. And I really hope that there'll be many of you who will be able to, in some way, do business with us. We'll be able to do business with you. And we can build a growing economy in this country.
Awesome.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.